Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you.
For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just go to getcopperhead.com. That's getcopperhead.com for your 2 free gifts with purchase. Getcopperhead.com.
Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details.
Friday. The weather out there is fantastic right now. Not too hot. Looks like it's going to be a nice day in the province. Some rain in the weekend. We will talk weekend weather, of course, with Allister Aalders later in the show after the 12:30 news, as we do each and every week. So we'll get all the details on what you can expect, and then the long range into next week, of course, which all anticipation about Canada Day, which is fast approaching, of course, on Tuesday. That's right. No show on Tuesday, by the way. I should mention that because we will be taking part in Canada Day celebrations and festivities and enjoying some downtime. But in the meantime, we got lots to talk about today. Vanessa Van Den Ness is away today. Her daughter's graduating with high honors, and she's very proud. So congratulations to Vanessa on the graduation of your daughter, and well done, obviously. Dan Alstrand's on the other side of the glass today. So be kind to Dan when you give us a call. Later on, we will open the phone lines as we do each and every day. Today from 11 until 12. And one of the things that I want to talk about, and we will be talking about this quite extensively today, is the Nova Scotia government says it's considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernizes policing services. Justice Minister Becky Druhan has announced 6 changes aimed at improving policing resulting from a review launched in September of 2023. The review was announced about 6 months after the Mass Casualty Commission released its final report on the shooting rampage in central and northern Nova Scotia that left 22 people dead in April of 2020. A lot of questions concerning this, folks, and the Justice Minister, Becky Druhan, will join the show at about 10:45, and we'll get her take on all of this. And Paul Palango will join the show to get his perspective on this after the 12 o'clock news. Of course, Paul Palango was on the show recently, who released his book recently, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth About the RCMP and the 22 Massacres, also the author of the book 22 Murders. And as you can, I guess, figure out from the titles of the book, Paul Palango is not a fan of the RCMP. I think that is a fair statement. Anyway, he will join us, and I'm anticipating fireworks when Paul Palango responds to this, because he would not support this, I'm assuming, and I think it's a safe assumption. Anyway, we'll break all this down. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask you is, during the call-in segment, should the RCMP get an expanded policing role in the province? Do they warrant it? Do they deserve it? Because I'm not sure that they do, to be quite honest with you, when you look at the response to Portapic, which I think most of us, if not all of us, would agree was substandard. Shouldn't say all of us, but I think most people would agree that it was substandard, to say the very least, with lots and lots of problems, which we have documented, and Paul Plango certainly has documented well. So should the RCMP get rewarded and expanded role here in the province? Is this the easy approach? Why not another option? Why not look at a provincial police force like the OPP has in Ontario or something like that? Why just simply say, well, we're going to expand the RCMP's role? What have they done to justify that? That is one of the questions that I'm going to ask. And how much does it cost for RCMP per officer? Because reading some stories today, including the mayor of Bridgewater, David Mitchell, who's been on the show a number of times, it says that they've got some serious concerns that there may be a move to push municipal policing out. There are 10 police forces here in the province, municipal police forces. And are municipal police forces underrated and undervalued and perhaps a better option? I think that's a legitimate question. And do you feel well served and protected in your community? That's another question. Anyway, we look forward to hearing from many of you when we open the phone lines, as mentioned, in about an hour's time. And lots of other things to get to as well, including Tim Powers at the bottom of the hour. So thanks so much for tuning in and listening. All right, let's jump in and chat with our first guest. This story I saw on the CBC website this week. Some who work in or study the food and agriculture sector are raising concerns after it was recently revealed the Nova Scotia government quietly abandoned its plan to develop a local food strategy. Joining us to talk about all this is Phoebe Stevens, Assistant Professor with the Faculty of Agriculture at Dalhousie University. Professor, thanks for joining the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good, thanks.
All right, so the food and beverage strategy was aimed at improving access to and increasing production of healthy local food. A round of public consultation was done for the initiative in 2022. But on June 12th, in response to a reporter's question by the CBC, the agriculture minister kind of quietly said it was not moving forward with the initiative. And this was a surprise to many, including yourself, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Tell me why this came as a surprise to you.
Well, because there hadn't been any previous communication about, delaying or abandoning the strategy. So I think it just has come as a surprise for most people, just not something that we had heard of until now. Okay,
so what was the strategy supposed to look like? What was the goal of it?
Yeah, so what was interesting about the strategy is it was a very kind of holistic approach. So the point was really to strengthen our local food system, but from various kind of vantage points. So looking at improving food security, also supporting smallholder farmers, investing in regional and local food infrastructure in the province, and ultimately kind of improving economic development here.
Okay, so how might that have looked like? What would it functionally? What would it have done? How would this have worked?
Yeah, so I think there were, through the public consultations, there are a few pieces that came out of that, and some of them have moved forward. So, developing a school food lunch program, for instance, investing in local food infrastructure. So now we have a very recently established Halifax Food Hub, and the point there is to aggregate distribution throughout the province, so that eases burdens on small-scale farmers. So yeah, the idea was to implement various initiatives like that to improve the resilience of our local food system.
Okay, and how integral is this to improve and to build in a type of a network for local farmers? How much of a need is there out there?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. Farms in this province are doing quite poorly, and farmers across Canada are struggling, but farmers here are struggling more. And this has to do partly because of our specific landscape. So farms in this province tend to be smaller, less mechanized. It's much harder for them to compete within a food system that's built for mass production. So if you think about the farms out in Saskatchewan, for instance, we're not competing on that level. So yeah, there has been a lot of decline in that sector. And when we think about the geopolitical tensions that we're dealing with, for instance, the tariffs from the United States. We have climate change disruptions. We know from COVID-19 that supply chains can be very vulnerable. So we know that we need to invest in our local and regional food system. So it is important, and it's quite urgent, actually.
Okay, so when we say invest in it, does that mean subsidies to farmers? Does that mean building depots? Does that mean building transportation networks? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it could be multiple strategies for sure. I think, with that Halifax Food Hub, for instance, the idea there is to build out that distribution network for smaller farmers. Right now, some small farmers are spending several days a week distributing their products, right? So they have to go to individual farmers markets to do that. Something like the Food Hub would act as a wholesale. So farmers could just go to one place, and then the Food Hub itself would be responsible for distributing the food to, it's called last mile delivery. So to, it could be hospitals and schools. It could also be markets and things like that. So that's one way it could look in terms of improving food security for Nova Scotians. We have this interesting Nourishing Communities program through Farmers Markets of Nova Scotia that provides low-income households with essentially market dollars that they can spend at the farmers market. So that's, again, an interesting strategy because you're addressing, an access issue, and you're also addressing a healthy food component, but supporting local producers as well.
Okay, so let's see here. Agriculture Minister Greg Morrow, as mentioned here, reading the story, the CBC story referencing it again, said the province has supported local food hubs like one in Cape Breton that provides infrastructure and distributes food from local producers to consumers and restaurants. The province also provides more than $850,000 to the Halifax Regional Food Hub. I think you mentioned the Food Hub earlier, which is currently getting set up. So here's a quote, said, "I don't think we need a strategy to do the right thing. We're acting." What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think that's it's a fair point in some ways. I think the reaction, the kind of disappointment comes from not having a holistic approach. That was what was interesting about the strategy. It was very coordinated. So doing things on an ad hoc basis, like it's happening now, it doesn't mean that those aren't positive initiatives, but we might be missing some kind of systemic changes that we could make if we had a more strategic approach.
Okay, what would some of those other strategic changes be that perhaps you haven't already discussed?
I think those are, like, the ones I mentioned are kind of the main ones that have come up at this point. There could be a number of different approaches. So again, when we're talking about investing in the food system, if we're talking about investing in processing facilities, for instance, right now a lot of goods are shipped outside of the province. In order to be processed. So, farmers are losing market dollars, they're losing profit margins that way. And you're also not retaining value in the province. So that's another piece that could be invested in. We do have a pretty big dominance of big retailers here. Sobeys and Loblaws, which, and in some cases they do push prices down. We have a lack of strong institutional purchasing programs. That's something that is seemingly coming on board, but I'm not sure, to what degree. So that's the idea that we have hospitals, schools, other public institutions purchasing locally. So those are some other areas that could improve the resilience of our system. Okay,
so when you talk about processing, would the private sector not be somewhat, if not completely, responsible for stepping in and creating a business model for that?
Yeah, I think it gets challenging. It's almost like a chicken and egg situation where if you don't have the right, currently we don't have a lot of processing here. So now the system is not necessarily geared towards a certain scale of processing, even though there are farmers and producers that would benefit from that scale. So there are groups like FarmWorks Investment Cooperative, for instance. Their goal is to provide low interest rate loans to businesses in Nova Scotia that improve the resilience of the local food system. So I know investing in a processor, supporting processors has been top of mind for them because they're thinking of how do we create, help to create a market, right, for these other products. So I think it may come down to a bit of a combination of blended finance when you're in a situation where maybe the profit margins or the sell for the private sector isn't quite there or the risk feels too high. Then you might need a blended finance approach where maybe government provides patient capital to attract that financial investment from the private sector.
Yeah, and of course, you mentioned food security and fluctuating markets and all that. So there's a value there that might not be measured in dollars and cents, but it's certainly there. If down the road you've got a shock to the supply chains, and we've got our own domestic source of food and production of food, that to me is got a lot of value, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it can be difficult when you're just looking at the dollars, like you said, and how do you forecast that future projection? How much would that cost us if we were in that position where we couldn't feed ourselves?
Okay, interesting chat. Phoebe, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much.
All right, take care. Phoebe Stevens is Assistant Professor with the Faculty of Agriculture at Dalhousie University. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation presented the Teddy Waste Awards. Prime Minister Trudeau was a winner. Not a dubious distinction, that's for sure. We'll be back with that. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation presented the Teddy Waste Awards. Joining us to talk about all this is Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Franco, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, Todd. Happy to be on with you this Friday.
All right, so the dubious distinctions were handed out this week, right?
Yeah. We handed out the big golden-shaped trophies to the politicians and bureaucrats that went really above and beyond in wasting our tax dollars this year. We had our mascot, Porky the Waste Hater, a big pig in a tuxedo, to help me hand out some awards. And we gave out awards to municipal, federal, provincial, and we even had a Lifetime Achievement Award for waste.
And, of course, that went to Mr. Justin Trudeau.
Oh, it had to. I think he was the Wayne Gretzky of waste, right?
Absolutely.
He doubled the debt. He ballooned the bureaucracy. You're paying for 99,000 more federal bureaucrats today than you were back in 2016. And then there's some crazy examples of waste from Trudeau, right? When he stayed in a $6,000 per night hotel suite in London, England, when he spent $220,000 on airplane food. I don't even know how you spend that much money on airplane food. That sounds like a lot of chicken wraps to me, And then also he spent $61,000 on Manhattan hotel rooms during a 2-day star-studded conference, and that conference was about fighting poverty. So, it sounds to me like fighting poverty, the only way he knew how was selfies, room service, and wasting of tax dollars.
And, of course, this is nothing new. We could go back decades and decades, and unfortunately, the story would be the same, right? And not only Liberal governments, but other governments as well.
Oh, well, you're absolutely right that governments of all political stripes waste money. I would say, though, Todd, the one difference was the doubling of the debt, right? Like that is different, right? Like when it took 150 years, nearly 24 prime ministers to add $600 billion of debt, and then Trudeau adds another $600 billion, so he doubles that debt in 9 years, that's different, right? Like that really is different, and that's something that our kids and grandkids are going to be making payments on the rest of their lives.
All right. Of course, the pandemic was a factor, though, in fairness. Not trying to be the defender of Justin Trudeau, but that was a factor.
Yeah, no, look, you're right to point that out, but even in 2018, before the pandemic happened, the Trudeau government was spending all-time highs, even after accounting for inflation and population growth, right? So spending more in 2018 than the federal government did during any single year of World War II. That, of course, was before the pandemic. The pandemic hits, and like 35% of all new spending had nothing to do with COVID. So, yes, there was spending on COVID. Everyone knows that. but Trudeau also used the cloud of a pandemic to go on a debt-fueled spending spree, and then he continued to spend like crazy after the pandemic. So I hear your point, fair enough, but crazy amount of spending happening before, during, and after COVID that had nothing to do with the pandemic.
Okay, on the hotel spending, the $6,000 per night, might there be an argument to be said that the leader of the country shouldn't be staying at the Howard Johnsons if there's still Howard Johnsons out there?
Well, I think there's a big gap between Howard Johnson and billing us $6,000 a night for a hotel suite. You know what I mean? I think there's a happy medium there. But here's the telling point, right? The government knew that he shouldn't be staying in a $6,000 per night hotel suite. Trudeau knew he shouldn't be staying in a $6,000 per night hotel suite. And the reason is that you might remember this story when the news broke. Actually, people didn't know for sure who was staying in the room, right? And then the government tried to bend the rules to refuse to disclose who it was who stayed in the room. Now, one thing at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation that we did is we filed an access to information request to get who stayed in the room. The government wrote down Justin Trudeau's name, and then they redacted it. And then we had to launch a legal challenge to force the government to disclose who stayed in the room. Mr. Trudeau knew he was going to lose that, and he ended up admitting that it was him when former President Joe Biden was coming to town. So that tells me that even the government knew that he shouldn't be spending that much money on hotel suites.
And of course, we could go on and on with the Rive scam, and the list goes on and on when it comes to Justin Trudeau. I know that Mark Carney hasn't. Perhaps he'll be a recipient in the future. But what about Mark Carney and his spending? And because from what I can gather, look, I think that a lot of people would attest that military spending is a good thing. But how do you get to 5% and a pretty short order of time? To me, that is a big question mark. What's your take on Carney?
Yeah, it's a huge question mark. I mean, look, we're gonna keep on Mr. Carney very closely, like we would any prime minister, right? And we're gonna file access to information requests to dig up different spending details. So time will tell. But to your broader question and bigger question about the 5% defense spending, I mean, look, Mr. Carney suggests that he may have to cut spending elsewhere. But that's not really accurate. If he's going to reach 5%, he's going to have to cut spending elsewhere, because you're talking about going from about $40 billion in defense spending this year all the way up to like close to $150 billion, right? That's tens of billions of dollars in extra spending annually, coming at a time when a government is already borrowing between $60 and $70 billion. So it's not a question of if he's going to cut spending. He's going to be forced to cut spending if he wants to reach that 5% target.
Okay, and my province where I hail from, New Brunswick, was a winner as well. So tell us about, because of the proximity, obviously, to Nova Scotia, let's talk about New Brunswick's win here, or loss.
Yeah, well, this story was crazy to me. I really couldn't stop laughing. I should have been crying maybe over the tax dollars wasted, but so New Brunswick wants to get tourism so it wants to get Europeans to visit the province, right? So they spend $77,000 on an 8-day trip to Europe. They meet with some tour promoters and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is that the ads that were created were full of incorrect information about the province, right? There was one ad that said, "Spend time in St. John, the provincial capital." Oh God.
Yeah. Hey, listen. I think it should be the capital, being from St. John, but it ain't.
Fair enough. Yeah, but it ain't. It had another ad. It was like, "Hey, relax before your flight to St. John, New Brunswick's largest city."
Well, but it used to be. Does that count?
Yeah, not anymore, man. Yeah, not anymore.
I think Moncton might be the biggest city now.
It is. Yes. It is. You're right. There you go. Yeah. There you go. And then, another ad was like, check out the Martella Tower. The tower had been closed for 9 years. Another ad suggested, check out the New Brunswick Museum. That had been closed for 2 years. Another ad said, go to the zoo. The zoo that they were talking about had been closed for 5 years. Yeah. So, Todd, you're not going to like this joke, but I got to say it, man. You know what their tourism ad should have been? Come to New Brunswick. We don't know where anything is, and everything is closed.
Yeah, well, it all would have been applicable a decade ago. I mean, maybe they just copied and pasted something from a decade ago. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe they're using ChatGPT or some AI and just forgot to edit it, hey?
That's right. Oh, my. All right, let's talk about Global Affairs Canada and booze.
Yeah, well, look, Global Affairs Canada won the award for the Federal Waste Award because they're spending $51,000 a month on alcohol, right? 51 grand a month on alcohol. And they've also just been spending crazy other areas. Like we found that they were spending $1,700 on a musical about lesbian pirates. They spent $8,800 on a sex toy show in Germany. They spent 12 grand on a show where seniors in other countries talked about their sex lives. And like Todd, these aren't even Canadian seniors, right? The government is outsourcing old people sex stories. So, I ask myself, like, how did all this spending get approved? And the only answer I could come up with is, well, maybe it's the $51,000 a month on booze.
Yeah, and look, we joke about this, but it's not laughing matter. It's really very serious, as you know. But I get the levity angle to it, which is smart because it gets us talking about it, and you need a chuckle once in a while. But that said, Franco, it's very frustrating that these things never change. I've been in this business for a very long time. I've had these same conversations with your predecessors, Kevin Lacey and others, who and the same thing, and we're here talking about it again. And something tells me that 10 years from now, if God forbid I'm here talking about this, if we're still in these same roles, whatever. But it just seems to me that nothing ever changes is the point.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little naive, maybe I'm a little optimistic, but my thing is like, look, you could try to make things better at the margins. Maybe not everything will be solved, but at least if we can keep poking at some of this crazy spending, we can. Number one, what I think we are doing right now is, talking to your audience, and they have a right to know how their tax dollars are being spent. So that's number one. But, if we keep pushing about this, especially if the debt situation keeps getting worse, maybe we can force governments to take action before things get really bad.
Before things get even worse, you should say. They're already really bad.
Oh yeah, man, we are really turning in the rain clouds this Friday.
That's right. No matter how dark it gets, we keep pulling down the blinds, right?
Yeah.
All right, Franco. Listen, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks so much. Hope you have a great weekend.
All right, take care. Franco Terrazzano, Canadian Taxpayers Federation Federal Director. Tim Powers when we come back. All right, it's the time of the week to talk to Tim Powers, Summa Strategies, Advocates Data, friend of the show. Timmy Powers, how are you, pal?
Well, Todd, those rocks were almost as old as those rocks they just had on the news there. I mean, look, we've had a good few million years, right? So it's been good. So I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Listen, every Wednesday when we tune into Power and Politics, when I say we, I mean my lovely wife Kelly and I, when we see her face, she says, "There's your buddy," every time.
Oh, well, that's nice of Kelly. And tell her, I think her husband's not such a bad guy, despite some of his poor sports choices. He's not a bad fella.
There you go. All right. So that said, you guys were chatting about we're heading into kind of the lulls of the news cycle right now, and I get that, but still a lot of important things going on. And this 5% of GDP spending military by 2035, how realistic is this, Tim?
It depends how you do the math and how committed the government is to committing to it. So what is the figure? It's like $100 and some odd $150 billion a year. Yeah, that's so I think we'll get to 2 this year, which is what the goal was, and then get up to 3.5. It's going to be tough, right? There's going to be some sacrifices around other services if the government is going to stay on this track. I mean, what's interesting for me is how do they turn this into something that's positive? Because, Todd, when you and I and the Rocks were younger, we remember, military bases and communities, particularly all over Atlantic Canada. And that was infrastructure and investment that people wanted. You'll remember the fights, all the base closures in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick over the years. I mean, are we going to see more military bases? Is that going to mean more investment? Will that maybe help dampen the sting or dull the sting that people may feel elsewhere? So it can be done, but other things won't be able to be done. And what will it look like? I think the most fascinating thing in that agreement is the review clause for 2029. And of course, as everybody's pointed out, Donald Trump, unless he messes around with the Constitution, is likely gone then. Yeah. So will the commitment be the same?
So I guess realistically, or I guess looking at it But logically, this may never come to pass.
Yeah, it may never come to pass. I mean, there are aspects of it that should, right? So if what the government has said is to be believed, that 1.5% of the 5% is going to be for infrastructure, critical infrastructure, well, then that's something people can get behind, because where in this country is infrastructure perfect? Nowhere, right? So does that mean benefits for places like Halifax and the port there? Is there going to be more investment there? A better rail investment in between Halifax and the rest of and the mainland, the main Ontario cities and stuff like that. So the 1.5 on infrastructure certainly can be done, I think. The 3.5 on equipment or whatever the other 3.5 is, it's a little tougher. I mean, it can be done, but it hasn't been done since 1950. The 1950s, and then we were coming out of the Cold War with the Korean War, so the country was behind it. And the last time we scaled up like this was at the beginning of the Second World War. So, I don't know if people's attitudes, mindsets are the same as they were then, and they fear the threat to be the same as people did at that time.
And is it all, when all is said and done, to appease one guy who you already mentioned, Mr. Donald Trump? Is it when all is said and done, does it zero back to that?
I don't think it's just that, but it in large measure is happening because he's saying he's going to screw up other things if it doesn't happen. I mean, Canada does have to up its defense game, as I think all would agree, and threats are much different than they were before. We can't rely on the U.S. as we once did, so Trump has accelerated it, I would say. And we'll see in 2029 what a new American president may be saying about these things and where we are with the rest of the world. But, Russia's not taking a step backwards. If you look out at some of the armament numbers that are there, they are a threat to our north. China is, as always, going about its business and looking at how it exerts itself around the world. And, then there are other threats out there, as we see in the Middle East, that could have impacts on us. So the threats are real. Yeah. Trump is pushing it forward, but the threats are real.
All right, I want to talk to you about Carney, and you're more dialed into this than obviously I am there in Ottawa, and with some people who are obviously directly involved with Carney. Is his style going to be hands-on? Is he because you kind of get the feeling that he is going to want to have his fingers in a lot of pies here when what's happening and how things are shaking down. A hands-on approach, is that a safe assumption?
In some areas, for sure. Look, I think, Francois-Philippe Champagne in name is the Minister of Finance, but you can be damn sure Carney will probably take a more active role than certainly Justin Trudeau did in budgets. I think he is looking to have strong lieutenants in different cabinet positions who he'll let have a free hand until such time as they demonstrate that maybe they can't perform. I think his hands-on will be in making sure he puts the right people in the right places and making sure that they do the job he wants them to do. I don't think he'll put his fingers into every department, but he'll make sure that the people he has know the departments that they have and deliver on what he thinks they should be delivering on.
Would he be quick to get rid of somebody, to fire somebody if he thought it was necessary?
I think so. I think he's still in a place where he feels he's got a lot of runway, and I think he does. I think he's wise enough. He's seen global crisis to know you got to seize them while they last, and they only last a certain amount of time. And if you feel that you don't have the right person in the right place during that time, then maybe you move them off.
All right, polling seems a little irrelevant just after the latest. We're just out of the last election, but you're in the polling business, Tim. So polling's always relevant. That said, what's the polling tell you when it comes to the Conservatives? They're not doing that badly according to your polling here.
Not we in Abacus have them in a reasonable place. Nanos has them in a slightly different place, and Nick's a respected pollster as well. I think it's more what the polling says and does to the people that Pierre Poilievre needs to get to support him come January. So those people who aren't fans of Poilievre will be saying, look at that Nanos poll, look at the gap, look at the negatives, look how negative this guy is. Can he lead us forward? Others will point to our data right now and different other companies' data and say, hey, look, he's not doing that badly. I think the where polling matters in the political climate right now is how it is used in the opposition world to shape out some of the decisions both the Conservatives and the New Democrats and even the Bloc need to make before the next election.
All right. Well, when it comes to Bill C-5, though, I would think that this is not going to help the Conservatives because it's really conservative policy almost, is it not?
And so is defense spending,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I think the challenge Poilievre and the Conservatives have is they haven't figured Carney out, right? And they've miscalculated their attacks on him so far. They thought all the Davos elite stuff would work, but apparently right now Canadians want a serious person, and they don't care about whether Mark Carney is well educated and the like. They like that he projects as serious. And a lot of the attacks the Conservatives are doing at the moment still are kind of Justin Trudeau-esque, like that rant on EV vehicles and subsidies. Who's talking about that, right? Yeah. A lot of that was Trudeau-esque kind of stuff. So that's a real challenge for the Conservatives right now. How to get their bearings on Mark Carney as he takes things that they are comfortably supporting.
And it's a good time for him to do it because the NDP are obviously very weakened, and so he's probably not going to lose center-left voters as well for support.
Yeah, no, I mean, there'll be some of those center-left voters who are irritated with, Canada being too close to Israel and being too supportive of Trump's bombings, or they'll portray it that way. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, the NDP is in a whole other place at the moment. Until they have, a leader who can focus them, I think, yes, the Liberals will assume that the NDP vote who came with them are still parked with them for now.
Okay, just quickly, I want to ask you about Alberta separatism. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says the public desire in her province to quit Canada has never been higher. Speaking yesterday to reporters in Calgary, she said Albertans feel deeply frustrated and angry with Ottawa and cited a separatist candidate who garnered almost 18% of a vote in a by-election in that province. So how concerning is this federally, Tim, or is this something we should be concerned about?
I don't think you can overlook it. I think you need to pay attention to it. But in the same vein, one of the things that Smith said has contributed to separatism is Ottawa not caring about or listening to Alberta's priorities. But she's also complimenting, the Prime Minister on Bill C-5. So, and what that may do to change the way people look at the federal government and the center. She plays off of that politically for her own purposes because she courts some of that vote. But the rest of us should pay attention. We shouldn't assume it's just something that's not threatening, but equally it's not something that is blown into a full-blown crisis. But it has to be watched.
All right, Tim. Always great. Appreciate it, pal. Have a great weekend.
All right. Tell your wife I now think she's awesome. That she thinks we're buddies. All right. You have a good weekend.
All right,
Bye.
pal. Take care. Tim Powers, Super Strategies, Abacus, a friend of the show. Always enjoy our chats with Tim. The Nova Scotia government says it's considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernizes police services. We'll chat with the Justice Minister if all goes to plan when we come back. The Nova Scotia government says it's considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernizes policing services. Joining us to discuss all of this is Justice Minister Becky Druhan. Minister Druhan, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. So among the 6 changes improving police, the largest change would be, I suppose, expanding the RCMP's role. That it's safe to say, would that be the largest change?
Yeah, so we are taking action in response to calls from Nova Scotians as a result of recommendations that have come out of provincial tragedies and following extensive consultation, research, and analysis. And so we have 6 foundational changes, And in addition to the 6 foundational changes, for sure, we include the expansion of the provincial police as being one of the recommendations that we're taking action on.
Okay, so when you say provincial police, that is RCMP, right? That's just to be clear. That's what that's right.
Yes, that's right. Nova Scotia right now, the provincial police force in Nova Scotia is the RCMP. It serves about 80% of the geography of the province, which is about 50% of the population.
All right. So what are the reasons why you think the RCMP should get an expanded role?
So this work follows extensive consultation. It builds on the recommendations that have arisen out of a number of really tragic provincial situations that we've had in the last number of years. And it follows extensive research and analysis that was done by Deloitte. And the recommendations were clear. Policing needs to change. We need more integrated, standardized policing across the province so that we don't have variations associated with geography and other factors. And the recommendations were clear that one of the important elements of this was expanding the provincial police.
Okay, but the RCMP, some would say, has not performed well, and does the research indicate that it has performed well? Tell me about the research that would warrant an expansion of the RCMP under what the role, based on what the role that it's the job that it's done, and including in Portapique.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I do want to say, and I want to be really clear, that we are accepting the recommendations and we're moving forward with them, but we greatly respect and deeply appreciate the contribution of our municipal agencies. We know that we have officers and agencies across the province operating with diligence and commitment, and our path forward absolutely reflects that. And so we have offered municipalities choice in this, which includes the choice to maintain municipal agencies. We want to make sure that we have standard, high-quality policing across the province, and so we will be ensuring that we have all of the agencies operating to the same high level of standards, but that is an option moving forward for municipalities as well.
Okay, but that didn't address the question, in fairness.
Right.
Okay.
No, totally. So coming to your question, as I mentioned, the RCMP polices about 80% of the geography of our province, and they police 50% of our population. In addition to that, they actually do respond and support every single one of our municipal agencies across the province, even those who have not contracted with or pay at all to the RCMP. So that means the RCMP are involved in the majority of investigations and of police work across the province, and they're involved in all of the complex and complicated operations. That means that just by virtue of that exposure, they are going to be subject to criticism. And so when there is an opportunity to evaluate and consider policing, they have such a big role. It does make sense that often their actions are being scrutinized. But I want to be very clear, the work that we did was work that reflects, and the community engagement that we've done and the feedback that we've received, what we've heard from Nova Scotians all across the province, whether policed by RCMP or municipal police, is that changes need to be made. So these recommendations and the actions that we're taking, they apply to our entire system. And that's what we've heard from Nova Scotia. Okay,
but again, is there empirical data that would say that the RCMP have done a better job than the municipal police forces in what you're talking about?
So the data that we're using is information, direct feedback that we've received from Nova Scotians. We had over 7,000 Nova Scotians provide input, both through surveys and through community consultations. That includes community members as well as our policing partners. And so we've had significant consultation. We had Deloitte's extensive research that looks at operations within Nova Scotia, experiences within Nova Scotia, policing within Nova Scotia, as well as doing a jurisdictional scan across the province and internationally, and then analysis based on that. And the result of that and the recommendations that Deloitte has put forward are that we expand our provincial policing model, and our provincial model is the RCMP as our provincial police.
All right. How much does it cost per officer, and how might that? And I'm assuming there's been a cost comparison between what it costs to have RCMP patrolling and municipal police forces patrolling. And is that a safe assumption that's been done?
So we absolutely have lots of information around costing, but it's not. It's really not easy to compare apples. Well, we have apples and oranges. And I'll just give you an example of why that's the case. So we have a variety of different agreements that provide, that incorporate the funding arrangements from municipality to municipality. And so another challenging issue around costing is what I described earlier. So each municipality that has their own agency is responsible for funding. For municipalities that are policed by the RCMP, there's a provincial contribution to that. But the RCMP regularly support those other municipalities, and there is no cost recovery associated with that. And so it's very difficult for municipalities who have their own agencies. They don't necessarily have a full capture of their own costs, because when the RCMP comes into support, they're not billed. So that's part of the work that we need to do, and part of the transformation that we're undertaking will include a new billing framework that ensures that all municipalities are able to sustainably support equal levels of policing, so that high quality policing happens all across the province, and municipalities are not impacted by differences in population and differences in ability to pay.
All right. Reading a CBC story this morning, the mayor of Bridgewater, David Mitchell, had expressed serious concerns about all of this, and he said that he doesn't understand how your government came to this conclusion when the municipal services are cheaper and have shown faster response times with more local visibility than the RCMP. What's your response to that?
Right. So I think this is actually a really good follow-up from the question that you just had earlier around municipal costing and how interoperability works between RCMP and municipal police. So I will say, in relation to the example that Mayor Mitchell gave with response from the RCMP coming to support Bridgewater. We'll say in that instance, those services that Bridgewater receives by the RCMP, Bridgewater doesn't pay for those. And that's the case across the province. When municipal agencies receive services from the RCMP, unless there are formal agreements in place, and there are a few of those, there's no payment for that. So that means municipalities in the surrounding areas who do pay for the RCMP are subsidizing that work. So it's really important that we reconcile that, and so that municipal agencies really have, all municipalities have fair funding arrangements.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for doing this, Minister. I appreciate your time.
Yes, I appreciate it. I really look forward to this work. It's incredibly important work. Nova Scotians have spoken loud and clear that they need to see these changes, and we're committed to getting it done and working collaboratively with our municipalities to make sure that we do have a system that supports our officers to do the important work that they do.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Take care.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Justice Minister Becky Druhan. And look, I'm just going to offer some commentary right now. I think that there are some holes in that interview, and I don't think she answered the questions to my satisfaction. What about you? What are your thoughts on this, folks? 902-405-6000. Perhaps you want to weigh in on this. Should the RCMP get an expanded role in policing here in the province? Do they deserve it? Is it warranted? Is this just perhaps an easy approach to just say, let's just expand the RCMP. They're already here, or we can bring them in. We don't have to do any heavy lifting and actually creating anything bricks and mortar ourselves. What are your thoughts on this, folks? 902-405-6000. You can get into that or anything else you have in your mind, but I'd like to hear from some of you on this very, very important issue which impacts all of us. And what are your attitudes in general when it comes to policing in the province or your municipality? Do you feel well served and well protected? 902-405-6000, an open hour when we come back. All right, taking your calls. Way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. 6,000. That is the way to get into it. The Nova Scotia government says it is considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernizes policing services. I just had a chat with the Justice Minister Becky Druhan. She announced six changes aimed at improving policing. Of course, the main one that I focused on was the expansion of the RCMP in the region. We have 10 municipal police forces. And I asked her some of the questions was what has warranted an expanded role by the RCMP? What empirical data is out there which would warrant that they deserve to have this expansion of a role, and that this would be the better option for the province moving forward? And she referred to this report which came from the Mass Casualty Commission, and this report which was put together by Deloitte. And to me, look, I'll just call it as I see it. Not a lot of substance there from the minister. I look and I'm just calling it as I see it. Certainly didn't convince me that this was the right move. I'm not saying that it's the wrong move, but if you're going to do something like this, I think you need to back it up with some pretty solid evidence as to why the RCMP should get an expanded role in the province as the provincial police force. And some municipal mayors and some municipal police forces are concerned that this may be kind of the beginning of the end to municipal policing in Nova Scotia. What are your thoughts on all of this, folks? Should the RCMP get an expanded policing role in the province? Is this the easy approach to just simply say we're going to expand the RCMP? What about Portapic and the RCMP response? I think that most of us would agree was certainly substandard, and lots of questions about that. Have they improved? What have the RCMP done to improve their capability since Portapic? How have they demonstrated this? Just because Deloitte tells me that trust us, or that this is a good move, that's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. And how about municipal police forces in general? Are they underrated and undervalued, and perhaps a better option? Do you feel well served and well protected in your community? You can get into that or whatever else you'd like to talk about this week. Of course, Nova Scotia Power back in the news, expanding or extending their credit monitoring with TransUnion to 5 years, and saying that more people than first thought were potentially impacted by this cyber breach. Or government waste, we talked earlier with Franco Terrazzano about that. Whatever you've got in your mind, 902-405-6000. Joe, hello.
Hey, Todd.
Hi there.
Was chatting with Dan. He's filling in for Veinotte, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. When it comes to policing, I've been arrested close to 20 times with regards to, and like I'll make it personal because it really is, but we need to figure out what to do. I'm telling you, when I was in jail, it was really difficult, and it makes people worse. And when it comes to Portapic, hopefully we'll figure that stuff out. Hopefully, the truth comes out with that. But I really think that the way we police, not necessarily the RCMP, but all of it, it was the most violent thing I've ever witnessed in my life. And I mean, I'm missing teeth. My ocular nerves are both broken, ruptured, I guess.
Okay, Joe, what are you getting at here? What's your main point here? I don't mean to rush you, but what's your point?
My main point is we need to figure out how to, what's the word? How to recapture people, I guess. That's my main point is policing does not, I had a home invasion. I came home in the middle of it, and my ex at the time was holding a knife in my driveway. and I went after the guy, and then she had called 911. So, in that case, that was important. But
okay, Joe, I'm going to move on. Thanks for the call, pal. Have a great day.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, take care. 902-405-6000. Tim, hello.
Warren, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Good. Very quickly, two things. Nova Scotia Power. I wish somebody could hold those who are responsible and accountable for the leak to be held responsible. 2 years or 5 years, I don't think it makes a difference. I think it should be a lifetime protection. People have worked all their lives to establish credit, and it may, for some, create an adverse impact for them. So I'll stop there on that. In regards to the RCMP, have they earned it? The short answer is no. They set up a board. They set up an inquiry. There's been a number of recommendations. They've taken the easy path. At the end of the day, many others will decide if the RCMP is a suitable replacement. But if I'm the other police forces, I'd be certainly, it's cause for concern because the number of police officers basically losing their jobs, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. It seems to me that kind of based on the chat that I had with Becky Druhan, that if I were a municipal police force, it would be cause for concern. I would dare say. I think that's safe to say.
100%. So, anyways, that's it, Todd. You have yourself a great weekend. We'll talk to you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Mark, you want to talk with the RCMP? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So basically, I don't know why we've never thought about having a provincial force like Ontario or Quebec, because right now it just seems like there's just a bunch of infighting between them, the municipal forces and the RCMP. Like, why don't we do something bold? People are just going to say, "Oh, it'll cost too much money." And
that's it.
Like
that'll be the first reason right there. Is people will say it costs too much. It'll cost too much.
But I mean, like when are things going to actually change? And I mean, you want to talk about cost. I mean, they always use that excuse. Why don't we have body cams for the officers, right? I've brought this up a few times on your show, but it's important. And finally, they keep saying, well, we're going to get it. We've approved it. But I mean, talk about that started in like 2018. That police station, which I have been in, and I have unfortunately been in the cells, that it's pretty inhumane conditions there. I mean, I don't know when that was built. I think in the 60s or 70s. It just seems to me that everyone just whines about money, and then they turn around and, will also, on the other hand, say, why don't we have better services? So, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And I do agree that RCMP, I mean, look, police officers are people, right? So there's good ones and bad ones for sure. And Portapic was an absolute disaster, but I agree, like, just having the minister on saying, well, anecdotally, this is what Deloitte told us, but she can't back it up with any kind of numbers. This whole thing seems pretty fishy to me. And I don't know. I think there could be some talk about maybe sometime in the future just having a provincial force. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Mark. All right. Appreciate the call. 902-405-6000. Tyler, hello.
Yeah, hi there, John.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
I'm assuming you're doing well.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd double check on that. First of all, happy Canada Day to everyone out there. I think we're allowed to say that again. And congratulations to Justin Trudeau on his new Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
Yeah.
That's well deserved. So that chat you had with Franco had me thinking about a few things. One thing, I don't know if you've noticed it, Todd, but I've heard more critical and almost demeaning coverage from Justin Trudeau since he left office than I did in the 10 years that he was in office and the years prior to him becoming prime minister. I mean, and you tell me if I'm onto something here, but he's getting
blasted. I mean, and it's just sort of like, where were you the last, decade? And the way I would tie this in is the media subsidies that the Liberals have essentially used to bribe our newsmakers in this country. And Todd, you're one of the good guys. I don't mean to lump you in with everyone else, but we have to admit that $2 billion a year isn't jump change, and it's going to buy you something. But now that he's out of office, he's a clown all of a sudden. I really do mean he's getting a strip torn off him pretty much any time his name comes up. Now, it usually comes up in the context of Mark Carney. So they're trying to say, well, isn't it great that we have an adult in the room again? And that's fine. I mean, it does seem like he's definitely an upgrade, but we've lowered the bar to the point where, answering questions in a substantive way or requiring your staff to wear dress attire, et cetera, is considered to be an accomplishment. I heard a story that Carney was that Carney was in meetings with some of the old staffers, made one of them cry. So some of these meetings, there'd be people sitting on the floor. There would be, people dressed in Adidas sneakers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, man, oh man, there's some good signs from Carney that we're going to turn things around. But at the end of the day, I think the spending commitments from the Carney government is not going to get us out of this mess. And government is the problem. It's not the solution. Yeah. But people in this country want to have their cake and eat it too. And we're not going to get to a point where we clean things up until we realize that, and until the problem gets so bad that we had no other option. But there's so many people feeding at the trough in this country, and I just don't know if there's a solution that involves people giving that up, because they're not going to unless I have to.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? It's a culture, right? And I think if you went to just about every other country, you'd see the same thing, right? I don't think it's unique to Canada, is my point.
You're right, but I think it might be worse here than in other places. Yeah. But
okay.
We'll see what happens.
Okay, Todd, thanks for the call.
Thanks.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. We've got some open lines for you. 902-405-6000. The open hour continues when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Something that I would like to hear from some of you on this. Like, you can talk about whatever you like. Obviously, it's an open hour. That's what it's all about. But the fact that Nova Scotia government says it's considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernized policing services. I chatted with the Justice Minister Becky Druhan about this earlier in the show, and it's all in response to a report from Deloitte, who did a study or an audit, whatever we're going to call it. And Deloitte recommended 6 recommendations, and among those is expanding the RCMP's role. And my question is why would we do that? What has the RCMP done to demonstrate that they deserve this expansion as our provincial police force? Where is the data which backs it up that they've been more effective when it comes to response times and other metrics that we use to measure policing? And I don't know that it's there. I don't know that we can just trust Deloitte's word for it. And what about what's this mean for the 10 municipal police forces already in the province? She said that they will be allowed to remain as long as they meet the standards. Well, who sets the standards? Is it the RCMP standard? Because if it's the RCMP standard, based on what we saw at a Portapic, then the standard is not very high. And our municipal police force is underrated and undervalued. That or anything else you want to get into, it is an open hour, of course, 902-405-6000. Jeff, hello.
How you doing today?
Well, you?
Not too bad. I spoke to you yesterday briefly about the fire ban, and on your newscast during the afternoon, the minister came on and started talking about after 2 o'clock ban and stuff. So after 2 o'clock, I went on and checked it. It's red right across the province until you get to Cape Breton, allowed to burn after 7. Well, I was sitting out last night with a hoodie and a small jacket over that, pair of heavy joggers, and I checked the fire ban, red right across, and no wind, and it was 18 degrees. Now, the days I mentioned yesterday, Tuesday and Wednesday, it was 110 degrees, and a 40 kilometer an hour wind on Wednesday. I think, they should just get a little more accurate. I mean, I could have had a bonfire last night. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up, Todd.
Okay, Jeff, thanks for the call. Thanks for the update. 902-405-6000. Michael, hello. Hi,
hello?
Mike. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to know, I know you want to talk about RCMP, but I'm coming from the black community of Pockwalk, and I'm trying to understand who polices the police and who polices the organizations like Nova Scotia, like Halifax Water, Nova Scotia Power. Because if that was one of us that made that mistake, we would have hell to pay. And for the Water Commission putting the wrong size pipes in a black community, which we can't even use the fire hydrants to fight a fire, and you got to go to lakes and you want to put dry things in, but when you go to the white side of the community, Lower Hammond Plains, their fire hydrants all works. I'm just like, when is the whites going to be right? It's always wrong. It's like, this community gets something, this community don't get it, we fight for it, we still don't get it. It's like, when are we going to be seen as people in Nova Scotia? We pay taxes, we like to be safe, we would like to think we have fire protection, but how come? And the Water Commission bought the Pockwalk watershed from my community. You don't help the community, you don't do nothing with the community, and it's like, when do we get our fair shake? Look at Africville. That's a joke. So the province gave us a church. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a joke. When are we going to actually do something?
Well, and this week, of course, there was a report on environmental racism that, or rather lack of a report, that the NDP is asking about. And so, and look, you're right. First Nation communities have been impacted detrimentally, and you're raising some valid points.
Yeah, and not only that, and the people that we pay for development in the areas, come on, Hammonds Plains and Pockwalk's getting all these houses. Pockwalk is still the only community out of the fires that does not have an exit to get out of the community. So we got one way in and one way out. And that's just like when the chlorine trucks go up that big hill. What happens when they flip? How are we getting out? I'm just saying, the lack of responsibility and the lack of Nova Scotia looking at it, Indigenous and black people, as less than human. When is it going to stop? I pay my taxes every year. Why can't I have the same safety and the same thoughts as everybody else?
Okay, Mike. Right? Appreciate your concerns. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. Good open line for you again. 902-405-6000. The open hour continues when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Get some open lines for you, folks. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Hello, Fred.
Hi, Todd. Good morning. Like you and Steve, like Steve Murphy and you suggested yesterday, I'll start off with a positive comment saying that Mark Carney is doing an excellent job. He's a man of action, and I hope he keeps on going.
Okay.
But that's not why I called.
well, that's not a bad thing to start off with a positive note. Some would disagree with you, but
oh, I know there would be.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to disagree with most callers probably you're going to hear about today. I do believe that the RCMP should be given an expanded role because I don't believe in what Paul Planko in his book has said, and I don't believe a lot of the other stuff that I'm hearing on the radio. One of the prime reasons that whole thing happened, once it's a one-of that's ever happened in Canada. You have never had a situation like this before, but more importantly is the people who hired the RCMP to go in there were told that they needed a minimum of, I forget how many police officers it was, and they said that they could not pay for that. So they turned around and, like they did with many other areas across Canada, went with a reduced force. And the reduced force has, as you know, a capacity to only react to certain stuff, not just stuff all over the place within a specific area. And I think when Portapique happened, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, there was only 2 or 3 RCMP officers at the time to do that whole area, in that area. So you've got to look at Portapique as being partially responsible or culpable for what happened in that situation. One of the reports you're talking about in the RCMP is not only an expanded, but a more robust RCMP throughout the area. And I think that they have the ability to do that. I think they have the infrastructure in place. They just need more police officers.
Why do you say that? You say you think they've got that. What have they done to demonstrate that to you, Fred?
Well, I'm a professional driver, and I go around and I go through HRM, and I don't see very much police action other than something that's happening at somebody's house. I see cars running red lights, everything else. I go outside of HRM, and I go all the way down to Jador, Muscadab, all the places where the RCMP are. And they're very involved in speeding and all the other things that happen throughout a community. And I think if you ask those communities, other than Portapique, that they would say, yes, these are very good police officers, and they're getting what they basically hired them for. That's my personal opinion. I'd like to hear from people from Jador and Muscadab and those places that have the RCMP rather than people from within Halifax HRM.
Okay, Fred, thanks for the call.
Yep.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Look, folks, I hear you that, and I take his point that municipalities only get so many RCMP officers based on how many they're willing to pay or able to pay. So I get his point that if communities that are policed by the RCMP had more money to spend on RCMP, they would have a larger complement of police officers. That makes sense. I get that. But the question then, and I asked Becky Druhan about this directly, is how much does it cost for an RCMP to patrol an area compared to municipal police forces? Or if we had our own formed provincial police force, how much? What are the cost comparisons? And I didn't really think that there was a direct answer anyway, and she suggested that oftentimes those outlying communities are subsidizing services that municipal forces get from the RCMP, like dive teams and other things like that. Anyway, 902-405-6000. Peter, hello.
Hi, good morning, Todd. 2 issues. One, I'll comment on the RCMP issue. And before anybody decides we need more RCMP, they need to read both of Paul Palango's book, 22 Murders and an Anatomy of a Cover-Up. Basically, RCMP municipal policing in the current state it's in is an absolute disaster. So I'll move on, though, the reason that I called, and one of it's about, my big issue is the net zero and what Mark Carney plans to do to Canada in regards of it. So folks might be interested that some of this data, and in Canada we have 318 billion trees in the 3rd largest forest in the world. Now, government's own data says each of those trees absorbs 48 pounds of CO2 annually, or 15 trillion pounds in total. So our forests suck up 15 trillion pounds of CO2 annually. But here's the kicker. Canada produces from all man-made sources only 1.3 trillion pounds annually. So it only takes between 9 and 11% of our forest to clean up all our man-made CO2. So we're already at net zero, and carbon taxes of any kind are a fraudulent scam. And the numbers don't lie. Those are government's own numbers.
Okay.
And one other thing I'll throw out too, Todd, is I'm getting up there in years, but I remember when I was a kid growing up, 30 degrees Celsius was 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and we wouldn't go to the beach until it at least hit those temperatures. All the weather maps were green, and there was no weather warnings at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. This morning when I got up on a Fahrenheit in the backyard at my place, it was 49 degrees, right? And later on today, we're going to have a ban on fires for this weekend.
Yeah.
So all I look at it as is fear-mongering, and what a lot of people refer to as fear point. I've got grandkids looking at some of these maps, and they're going, "Oh my God, look at the heat, and Canada's all red and stuff." Well, 86 degrees is something that I grew up calling summer. It's not heat warning weather. It's nonsense. Anyway, that's just my cent and a half for today.
Okay, Peter, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Look, as far as I'm concerned, the weather for a couple of days this week was more than humid any decade that you might have lived in. It was hot. But again, 2 days, one off for half. Look, I take his point. 902-405-6000. Ryan, hello.
Hi, Todd. How are you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Oh, just great. On his points, I agree entirely on everything he was saying. And sort of on that note, I wanted to talk about the fact that all these, like Sam Austin supporters and the bike lane supporters and all that, the ones I've been hearing call in are complaining constantly about how this is supposedly a car-centric city, which, let's be honest, it is. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason. We are the center of government for the province. We are basically the hospital center for the entire Maritimes. We are a university center. We are a port city. Like, they're totally divorced from reality if they think that automotives are not the primary means that people are coming here from PEI, from Moncton, from Yarmouth, from Cape Breton. Like, it's nonsense. We can't go about sacrificing the ability of automobiles and trucks to get through the city, like to the port, which is, as deep into the city about as you can get. Like, we can't do that just for it's a small percentage of people who are riding bikes. And then there's the other factor, which is we are a North Atlantic city. We are a subarctic country. We don't have that many months of the year here that people can comfortably ride bikes, and you don't see it. In the depths of the winter, there might be a couple of hardcore cyclists out there braving the elements, but the simple fact is, like, what they're saying about it being a car-centric city and that's somehow a problem, that it's totally divorced from reality, and they're not considering, like, the factors that are immovable.
Okay, Ryan, so do you think we should have any active transportation in the city or none?
Yeah, I mean, we could make concessions where it's appropriate, where the vast majority of traffic, say, is pedestrian or cyclist or whatever. But I don't think that we should be, like, we already have very narrow streets. We already have very little parking. We already have, like, all of these stop gaps. And if you try to get anywhere in the city right now with the very few bike lanes that we have, and, it's almost impossible. I've had to take my newborn to the IWK a few times in the past month, and it's a disaster. Everywhere you go, there's no way to get around any of it, and we want to make it worse? Like, that's absolutely nuts to me.
Okay, Ryan, appreciate the call. Appreciate your opinion. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Jamie, hello.
Hi, good morning. My thought on the expanded policing roles. I think there needs to be, again, I'm no professional, but just my own thought that I think there needs to be more regionalization, kind of like what happened with amalgamation, having Dartmouth, Halifax, Bedford amalgamated into one force. So you get these small communities that are very close together. For example, everywhere between Aylesford and Wolfville, I think should be one police force where you have the RCMP amongst them, and you have the Kinfill in the middle. They have their own force. So I think it should just be one force for these small communities that are very closely joined. Same thing for, like, Digby to Annapolis Royal. You got Cornwallis in the middle. I think it would help fill those gaps where you have those small response times and less services. Even though the RCMP is a federal agency, they don't have all those resources that a larger municipal force would have, which by amalgamation, you would be a much larger force. And I apologize, I did miss the beginning interview, so I'm not sure what they meant by expanding roles. I think they should maintain a federal policing and also, unless they want to do a provincial policing, such as like highway patrol, such as what the Alberta sheriffs do, in those types of examples. I just want to share my thoughts on that.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate it. Thanks for the call, pal.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Adam's a first-time caller, so Adam, I wanted to get you right on. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, I've been a cyclist in Halifax for, most of my life, and I would say that Halifax is not a cyclist-friendly city. We're filled with hills, and most of our streets, you don't necessarily want to take a bicycle on, let alone battling the traffic. It's battling the hills, and I think that for, the maybe 6% of our local population that may actually use a bicycle, to, obstruct this much traffic for that 6% is just absurd. And yeah.
Adam, did you say you're a cyclist? I'm just trying to.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so do you?
I also worked at one of the most prominent bike shops here in Halifax.
Oh, is that right? Do you cycle every day? I'm just curious. Just curiosity.
No, I don't cycle every day anymore, but I did travel back and forth to work daily on my bicycle for years.
Okay. Then, did you find it dangerous to do so in the city without bike lanes?
Not as much 10 years ago, no. Nowadays, traffic is crazy.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I would never ride a bike in the city bicycle. So I think you're taking your life in your own hands. I really do. I think it's just crazy.
It's no different than a motorcycle, right?
Well, it is different in that you can't keep up with the flow of traffic, right? That to me is the real issue.
Well, the motorists, they don't see people on a motorcycle, and that's with a loud engine.
Well, exactly. That's exactly right. So, look, I'll tell you right now, like I see bikes coming once, and I don't see a lot of them, but when I go by bikes going down Heron Cove Road, for an example, there's nowhere to go. There's no room anywhere for anybody to get around a bicycle on Heron Cove Road to do it safely. And I just think that it's just people are taking their life into their own. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from driving a bike in this city. And look, maybe people listening to this right now saying, "See, Todd, you're stating the case why we need bike lanes." And maybe I am. I don't know, but I would not cycle in this city. I would not.
If we were to take Europe, for example, they have streets that are older than ours, narrower than ours, and they've got way more cyclists in that, but they also have less hills in these areas, or they have areas that are like, more common for cyclists.
And generally their cars are smaller too, right? They don't have the big trucks as much as we do, or that type of...
But here we have a few narrow streets, and it's all hell trying to get a bus lane, a bike lane, and some kind of common space, and now everything. It's just like, well, the hell with the vehicles and the the flow of traffic, and trying to get traffic moving rather than just jam it all up some more, right?
Right. Okay, Adam. Appreciate the call, pal.
Take care.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Sean, hello.
Hi, how you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
I'm not too bad. I got so many things in my mind, I'm not sure what I want to ask you first, your opinion.
Okay.
But one thing that really has bothered me forever is tax on used vehicles.
Yeah, for sure.
And your registration sticker on your license plate. The sticker doesn't really mean anything. And how many times do we have to pay tax on a used vehicle? That would really help out Canadians in troubled times.
Mm-hmm.
And also, something else I'd like to understand, and maybe you might be able to shed some light on it, is the big box stores, Canadian Tire, for instance, that you can have a sale to save 86% on a particular item. how can that be justified for them to actually still make a profit off of that product? Because they're still going to make a profit off the product and selling it for whatever they put on sale for. It just seems like the world is gouging everyone.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you, and it's true. When they have these clearance sales or whatever, and you say, okay, how can you sell it for 80% off and still make a profit? What does that say about how much money they're making when it's full pop retail? I agree with that, and I agree with you 1,000% on the tax on used cars. How many times, like you said, does the government get its 15% every time a car gets bought and sold? And you make a great point.
Exactly, and nobody really. I never hear anybody talking about that kind of thing. They don't bring it up. It's people just forget about it. But there's one other thing I'd like to mention.
Yeah.
My daughter, which is 18 years old, has a job, and her job, they brought in temporary foreign workers. So she's a Canadian citizen, and she's trying to make a living. Minimum wage is all that she's getting paid. But when they bring in these temporary foreign workers, those temporary foreign workers have to have 40 hours a week. So the Canadians that are trying to work, their hours are cut back because they have to supply the temporary foreign workers with 4 weeks' hours. So when it comes to the unemployment rate of Canadians, it's faltered. How can it not be?
Yeah, my daughter's and to that, I saw a story this week where I think that the federal government wants to have 25% of the workforce devoted or dedicated to immigrant workers.
Right, but where does that leave Canadians? How are we ever going to get control of our unemployment rates? Inflation, kids trying to buy a home or rent a place so they can actually get out of their parents' houses. There's a lot more going on than just silliness about forest fires, the silliness about bike lanes.
Sorry, Sean, we lost you. But I get your point. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Ralph, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm well, you?
I keep saying I'm not going to say that to start because we know you're good.
That's all right. No problem.
I'm calling for two reasons. One, with all the problems we're having with pedestrians, what have you, it's a lack of education. We educate these people that are using the crosswalks. They have the right of way in the crosswalk. They don't have to look left or right to look after themselves. They can just step right out, and it's the driver's responsibility. I drive through town on a very regular basis. I work at the container piers, and the people are so ignorant. And then you've got the people that are going down gravel roads out of town that walk with the traffic. Now, we've been educated for our whole lives that you walk facing traffic. Why? So you can protect yourself if you see a car coming. That's just basics. But we do not educate people properly anymore. If at a crosswalk, they have the right of way once they're in the crosswalk. When they're just stepping off the curb and they've looked both ways, they have the right of way. They don't have the right of way just to step out in front of you and make cars stop. Maybe people disagree, but we're serving and making rules for the stupidest people on the road and the worst drivers on the road because, we need laws to protect people that are on the streets. Why not educate these people so that they don't do the things they do?
How do we, Ralph? I take your point on walking against traffic. I mean that just makes common sense. And but how do you educate people on how to be a better pedestrian?
Well, in Toronto, they have a law.
Yeah.
I still think it's valid. You have to point to go across a crosswalk. Doesn't matter if there's traffic there or not. If you don't put your hand up and point that you're crossing, you can get a ticket.
Yeah.
And that's a very simple law. And when people get ticketed, they start pointing. All of a sudden, they wake up and realize it's to protect themselves. It's a very simple rule, but you have to legislate that. As far as educating, you educate people that they do point. And we have flags. We put flags everywhere. We shouldn't have to have those at every crosswalk. Just put your hand out and point, and look left and right. That's how you have to educate them.
Well, maybe we've done a bit of that in this short conversation, Ralph. Let's hope we have.
Yep. I do have one more thing.
Okay.
The other day we were talking about all the problems with money grab and what have you. People working. It used to be that one person worked, they made enough money to look after their family, and that was just the rule. And one parent stayed home. Back then it was mothers. Today it can be anything. Then we had a war, and women were pushed to work in the factories for the war effort. That was great. All the soldiers and sailors and what have you came back after the war, and all of a sudden there was a surplus of employees.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so you got to wrap it up quickly.
Okay, well, now two people have to work, and the greedy companies are making all the money with lower wages.
Okay, Ralph.
Leave one person home and hire away. Okay.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. All right, I don't think we're going to dial back the clock anytime soon when it comes to that issue, but I take his point. We're talking about the RCMP, Paul Palango, when we come back. All right, the Nova Scotia government says it's considering a larger role for the RCMP as the province restructures and modernizes policing services. Justice Minister Becky Druhan, who I chatted with earlier in the show, has announced 6 changes aimed at improving policing resulting from a review launched in September of 2023. The review was announced about 6 months after the Mass Casualty Commission released its final report, of course. Druhan says municipalities will be allowed to keep their local police as a force, rather, as long as the force meets provincial standards. Otherwise, they will need to switch to the RCMP. Joining me to discuss all of this is Paul Palango, author of a couple of books recently, Anatomy of a Cover-Up, The Truth About the RCMP, and the Nova Scotia Massacres, and 22 Murders. Paul, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Hey, glad to be back.
All right, so one of the first questions that I asked the Justice Minister was, what has the RCMP done to demonstrate that they should get an increased presence here in the province? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, my thoughts are to Premier Tim Houston. Thank you for this report, because it's the cherry on the top of the cake for the book that's out right now and at the top of the bestseller list. Because essentially they're proving what I wrote about, that there's been a coordinated cover-up from the beginning to protect the RCMP and to rehabilitate its reputation. And so what have they done? Nothing. They're problematic right across the country. Everything about the force says we shouldn't have a force, and even the federal government in its report from the public safety minister in March said we've got to get the RCMP out of contract policing in Canada. So I don't know what this report is supposed to be doing and what the province of Nova Scotia is intending to do with this.
Okay, so when it comes to allowing municipalities to keep their police forces if they reach the standard, I think that that to me, and I read in the news today some area mayors, including the Bridgewater mayor, David Mitchell, has serious concerns, feeling as though that the eventual end game may be to dismantle all municipal police forces. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's it. I mean, what you're seeing here, if you look at what happened in Portapic, your earlier caller, Fred, was going on, this was a one-off event. This fellow clearly doesn't understand what happened and hasn't read my books, even though he criticizes them, because I deal with facts. I use the RCMP and the MCC's facts to show the story. And what the story is that the RCMP failed right across the board. It failed before the massacres in the way it trained people, the way it set up, the way it ran things. The province failed in not sort of having a better staff force, an accountable force, et cetera, because they got what they wanted. They thought they were getting policing on the cheap. And when you're seeing this report and the RCMP and the government gleefully attacking municipal police forces, over the past 10 years at least, the municipal police forces are trained and better trained than the average RCMP officer. I know this is news to a lot of people, but they are. They're all tactical because they have to be, because they can't rely on the RCMP. And the suggestion is that the RCMP is in there helping the municipal police forces. On the contrary, that happens occasionally, but the municipal police forces are helping the short-staffed, understaffed RCMP at all times. And the RCMP gets away with this because they're not accountable to the provincial or municipal governments. The municipal forces can't make a mistake without it coming to the attention of the local government or the provincial government, because they have oversight. The RCMP doesn't, takes advantage of this, and are basically, they're doing what narcissists do. This is basically gaslighting and projection. They're taking their own problems and putting them on the municipal police, when what we need are stronger municipal and regional police forces. The RCMP is headed out anyways. I doubt any of this is going to happen, because at the federal level, the government is losing interest in contract policing.
Okay, so with the idea of a provincial police force, which would be kind of like the OPP model, what are your thoughts on how realistic that might be, if there was a will? Well,
I think that what you probably need, I'm not sure the OPP model is the best. The OPP is like a mini RCMP and has its own problems as well. But larger regional forces like the Cape Breton Force, which has gone, not only does Sydney, but it now does some of the First Nations reserves as well in its area, and the First Nations opted for them because they do a better job than the RCMP. The other thing is, like, the larger regional forces will help control policing costs. Fred said, well, they can only, the communities down in Musquodoboit or whatever can only afford 3 officers. The reason why that is RCMP officers are expensive. You're paying for people to do a job. They're getting paid the same as they would in downtown Vancouver or in any big city. They live like kings, and they have interminable time off. One of the things, next time we have Becky Druhan on, or the Premier, ask them how many days off RCMP, what the staffing levels are at any detachment, how many people are off sick, and how many have been off sick for months or years. And you know what you're going to find here, Todd? They won't get an answer. They have no say over what the RCMP does. And this is problematic in any sort of democracy like ours. We need local control. So setting up regional forces, and the way to do it, set up a regional force, and maybe join forces with the New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland, and have a large sort of interprovincial force overseeing it. Because what we need is layered policing. Because if we don't have layered policing, it's an invitation to crime and corruption. Right now, one of the stories I'm dealing with in my book, I don't know if you've read it or not.
I certainly have, yeah.
Well, one of the stories is, who killed Corey Ellison? Mm-hmm. I should be changing the title of my first book to 21 Murders Plus One, Who Killed Corey Ellison? Because I make the case, sorry, Fred, based on the facts that somebody other than Wortman likely killed Corey Ellison. But who's going to investigate that? If the RCMP is the only police force and there's no one who can investigate it, it gets back to reports what someone else said. We need sort of layered policing that's rational and makes sense, not a business-like approach that everything is efficient, because efficiency and the law don't go together, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so might this be, instead of perhaps just cheerleading for the RCMP or defending the RCMP based on some type of ideology or pride, sense of national pride or whatever, might it be just the easiest thing to do to just say, well, let's just expand the role of the RCMP, and that's the easiest way to deal with all of this.
Well, as I said, the federal government's losing interest. The RCMP is likely going to lose its contract in Alberta. Saskatchewan, right now what happened in Saskatchewan shows how bad things are. Saskatchewan's the home of the RCMP. The recent Assistant Commissioner, Rhonda Blackmore, was fired summarily a couple of weeks ago. Why? Because she refused to send officers to Kananaskis for the G7, because staffing is down 30%. At least in Saskatchewan, and probably more, and she wouldn't strip her communities of policing for a national federal job. This is the problem. We have no federal policing. The RCMP should be doing federal policing. That's the issue. But you know what the RCMP has done, and I don't see Premier Houston or Druhan or any of them talking about this. They set up a big headquarters at 80 Garland in Burnside. In that headquarters, I understand, they set up a state-of-the-art crime lab. It looked like a good thing. Since then, only a few years later, they moved the crime lab to Ottawa. So all investigation stuff, it requires a lot of travel, et cetera, et cetera. They've consolidated all of this in Ottawa. Why do you think they did that? To save money? No, to make it difficult for provinces to go into provincial policing by arguing you're going to have to set up your own crime lab now. You're not going to take over ours, and it's going to be inefficient. It's going to cost you a lot of money. So they're basically defending against this, and the government of the day, Premier Houston, is sitting on his butt and not doing anything about it and going along with reports from his old employer, Deloitte & Touche, which amounts to nothing. The Deloitte Touche report was started a couple of years ago. It comes out now. Well, they did a similar report in Surrey, arguing against the RCMP being kicked out of Surrey because it'd be so expensive, et cetera, not efficient. And the government of BC, Premier Eby, said, no, we're getting the RCMP out of here and creating a Surrey police force, because in the long run, it's going to save us money. And that is the argument right there. So, the superficial arguments about cost are generated by the RCMP and insinuated into the system. And one more thing about the Deloitte report. They interviewed 7,000 people, they said, about this. Mm-hmm. They didn't interview me, any of the people I know, none of the ex-law enforcement I know, none of them. I suspect they interviewed about 3,000 members of the RCMP Veterans Association.
Okay, story on the CBC website this morning. Mayor David Mitchell of Bridgewater says that, which of course has its own police force, said he doesn't understand how the government came to this conclusion when municipal services are cheaper and have shown faster response times with more local visibility than the RCMP. Is there empirical data that supports that, Paul? Absolutely. True.
No, the municipal forces are better organized. They're not spread out. The RCMP's game is rural policing with minimal personnel. They do not do urban policing very well. People in Moncton go crazy about it. In Kelowna, BC right now, they're talking about getting rid of the RCMP after Grand Prairie and Surrey did, because they don't do municipal policing very well. That's not their thing. But you've got people like our friend Fred there who are true believers. They don't know the facts. They won't read the facts. They won't absorb the facts. That this force is not, it's sort of a zombie police force, sort of the Hudson's Bay of policing. It's not what it says it is. It makes itself look bigger than it is, and it's not accountable. A point on that. People see, this guy trotted out, Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, and they go, Dennis Daly running Nova Scotia as an Assistant Commissioner. Well, in real terms, the number of policemen he is policing when they all come to work, which is rare, is about the same size as the police force in Hamilton, Ontario. Mm-hmm. It's not a major posting. There's like 30 assistant commissioners in the RCMP. There's a lot of puffery and regalia and things like that, but it's not what it says it is.
Okay, Paul, here's a quick email that I want to get you to respond to before we run out of time. Mark says this: why does Paul have such a personal vendetta against the RCMP?
I don't have a personal vendetta against the RCMP at all. I started, with the RCMP, doing RCMP stuff back in 1992 when I asked a former assistant commissioner.
He may have gone home
This question.
off, but you can hear everything you missed.
So I asked a former RCMP assistant commissioner this question: why was the RCMP a successful federal police force in the 60s and 70s and not in the 80s and 90s? And he said, that's a very good question. I'm 6 books into it now. I'm starting a 6th book. It's not that I hate the RCMP. I hate what the RCMP has become. It's not a federal police force. And not being a federal police force affects small towns, communities. It's drugs, money laundering, financial crime, all those things going on, sort of affecting the economy and everyday lives because the RCMP is not doing its job. And, the RCMP likes to say, oh, he hates them, he's a hater. I have all kinds of people I talk to regularly, and I've sent you some emails showing that I have all kinds of ex-RCMP people and some current RCMP members who say I'm 100% right because they read what I've written, they read the facts, and they understand that.
Okay, Paul, appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, take care. Paul Plango, author and obviously outspoken, but that's what the show's about, folks, is opinion. Celtic Colors announces its lineup for this year. We'll have this when we come back. All right, the 29th Celtic Colors International Festival kicks off Friday, October 10th in Port Hawkesbury at the Civic Center. Joining us to discuss this is Joella Folds, the acting artistic director for Celtic Colors. Joella, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Todd. Nice to meet you on the radio.
Indeed, for sure. All right, so it sounds like you've got a pretty exciting lineup. Let everybody know some of the things that you'd like them to know.
Yeah, we're really excited about the lineup this year. We've got 51 concerts, and those are taking place in communities all over the island, as they always do. And we have a nice mix of locals and internationals and visitors from across Canada. So this year, some of the special highlights will be our opening and closing, of course. So the Barra McNeils and David Francie and Fluke will be part of the opening. And then the closing concert, we've got Jimmy Rankin, who's actually performing his debut Celtic Colors show for the closing.
What took you so long to get Jimmy Rankin on the lineup?
I don't know, but we went after it this year and we made it happen. But it's exciting, and we've just brought in all kinds of people from away, as we usually do. When we started looking at who we wanted this year, we discovered that quite a few of the bands and even organizations are having milestone anniversaries. And so we have artists who have 30 years and 25 years that they're celebrating. And then we have an organization from Scotland called Keolis, which has been teaching back and forth and bringing Cape Bretoners over for 30 years. And so we're sort of doing a collaborative show with them in Nauvoo, and that's sort of the middle of the week. But throughout the whole week, we've just got a lot of interesting collaborations and people singing and then performing in the same concerts that they might not have ever met before, and we usually find by the end of the show, and for sure by the end of the week, they've come together and usually kept in touch with each other and often collaborated musically.
Yeah, and of course the backdrop of Cape Breton in October isn't bad either, right?
No, well, when we named it Celtic Colors, we we knew what that was about, because it's the height of the leaves and all the bright colors throughout. And, as you drive around from community to community to go to concerts, you get to see this giant flower garden everywhere, the reds and the oranges and the yellows. And it's really quite beautiful. So it's a wonderful time to come. And it's a great way to see the whole island because of the fact that the concerts are spread out so widely. Besides the concerts as well, we have a lot of communities who want to be involved in other ways, and so we coordinate a series of more than 250 community cultural events. So those will be things like workshops, square dances, sessions. Sometimes they're community meals, hikes, just a whole variety of activities that people can take part in during the day when they're perhaps on their way to their concert that night.
Yeah, there's so many details, obviously, and so much for everybody. As far as the economic vibrancy goes and what this means to the island, it can't be understated. I would say that's a fair statement.
It can't be understated, and I don't think people quite realize what it means. Over the years, so the first 28 festivals up until last year, there has been direct spending of $220 million by our audiences, and we survey them so we know how much they spend. I don't know what that would translate into economic impact. I mean, it's hard to even imagine. But every year, it's now around $20 million that's brought into the island during those 9 days. People spend it on their hotel accommodations, on meals, on gas, on all the things that they need while they're here. And it stays in the communities, which is lovely because it isn't just in one place; it's all over.
Okay, and if people want to know more about all of this, they can check you out online because there's lots and lots of details and things that we didn't get to. So direct everybody to all things Celtic Colors, if you will.
Yes, CelticColors.ca, and tickets go on sale July 8th. And you know, you don't have to get them the first day. A lot of people think they do. There'll be tickets that are available for the next while, but, you know, don't wait too long.
Joella, looks like you got things well in hand, and thanks for doing this. Good luck.
Thanks very much, Todd.
Take care. Take care. Joella Folds, Acting Artistic Director, Celtic Colors. In the next half hour, we'll talk sports with Cecil. Lots to get to with Cecil. Always enjoy our chats. And Allister Aalders, our weather specialist, has some explaining to do. We'll be back. Much anticipated. Hi. Allister Aalders joins us, weather specialist. You set that up just so that I wouldn't boo you, didn't you?
Yeah, just trying to create a diversion, you know, to
well,
to get past it.
Hiss.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Here we go.
Wow.
We've brought it back.
I know. We had a great weekend last weekend.
Oh, it was so nice.
It was beautiful. A little bit of rain at the end of Sunday, but that was perfect for the fire, right?
That was, I mean, talk about
godsend.
Better, you know, the best timing you could have had, you know, that fire. It was really breezy, you know, on Sunday afternoon. So, you know, when I heard it was spreading rapidly, I was a bit concerned, but that the rain moved through right on time, and I think that really helped allow the firefighters to get a handle on it because obviously it was spreading rapidly and out of control, but we had some heavy rain move through for a few hours, and it was a pretty, you know, bit of a damper night. So that really helped, especially when we did have the drier. Well, I shouldn't say drier. I mean dry in terms of no rain, but the hot weather that we had, you know, early in the week, we certainly needed that because if we didn't have the rain, I think it would have been a much more challenging fire.
Definitely.
Given that, you know, it was so hot for the couple of days there. I mean, it was pretty humid, especially, you know, on Tuesday, so that would have helped the crews. But I mean, it was really just perfect timing for that wildfire, and thankfully I don't believe there were any structural losses.
There were not, and there were evacuations, of course.
Yes.
And it's interesting because Kelly and I went out past that area and went to a beautiful Provincial Park beach, and I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, it was out way past that. And on our drive back, we could smell the smoke and the heavy smoke, and then we saw the fire trucks responding on our way back into Dartmouth. And then when we get home, we found out that this thing was, and it looked pretty darn scary at first.
Well, some of those photos, I mean, it was approaching on some structures, so it was very serious. I mean, that area is, I wouldn't say known for wildfires, but they've certainly had their fair share of, the Porter's Lake wildfire back in, I believe it was 2008. And then a few years ago, they had a wildfire. And I believe there was actually a small fire that broke out yesterday or the day before. So there's a lot of, dense brush and some of it dead brush in that area. So it's a bit of an area where, once ignited, those fires can really spread. So, it was really great that we had that rain moving through right at the perfect time, which it never seems to usually when these situations happen. We're, begging for the rain to come through. But, I was so happy when it started to really downpour on Sunday afternoon. After a really nice Saturday, I think, I hope everyone was able to get out and enjoy it.
Saturday was a bellwether day.
It was perfect. I mean, mid-20s for most. I mean, depending on where you are, a bit cooler at the coast, but, mid-20s, low humidity. I think that's almost, for many of us, a perfect kind of summer day if we could define, that. I know some people like it really hot and humid like we had, but I think that's kind of a bit of a nice summer weather pattern that too bad we can't have all season, right?
Well, what it was beer drinking on the deck day. It was patio, great for that.
Great patio weather, great beach weather. Yeah. I went for a drive on Saturday. Great road trip weather. Yeah, it was really nice.
Okay, and back just to kind of put a bow on, not a bow, but to finish up the conversation on fires. We have, I think it's 50 active fires in the province, something like that. I've heard. But again, people need to pay attention to the burn ban. Check out the website before you burn. Check it out, right?
Exactly. And I mean, a reminder, no burning at all but before 2 o'clock, before they make that decision. And, check that burn map and also be aware of what the weather conditions are going to be like, because even on a day where maybe burning is allowed after 2 or after 7, maybe it's a bit of a breezier day, and maybe reconsider just depending on what kind of fire you're going to be burning, because especially around this time of year, it can be pretty dry, and you get a bit of a southerly wind come up in the afternoon, or it could be from any direction. But, at this time of year, we're often dealing with those, warm southerly winds that can, really cause these fires to spread rapidly. So very important that you're checking the burn map every day at 2 o'clock, and checking your weather conditions too, knowing what the wind direction and forecast are going to be, and what weather conditions are going to be like around the time you're planning to burn. Very important.
Okay, a couple of days this week I would describe as stifling hot, and the humidity was just, it was heavy out there.
It was. I mean, it's you walk out the door and it kind of hits you in the face. What a difference, though, between, Wednesday morning and Thursday morning.
And last night it was 10 degrees.
And what a difference when it was, high teens, low 20s Tuesday night. So it was stifling for sure. I mean, humidex values for much of the province were into the high 30s and low to mid 40s. Many places were into the 30s, including Halifax on Wednesday. It's not too often that we get the winds flipping over to the northwest, and it's, the city that's warmer than some of the inland locations, but that was exactly the case. We were up into the low 30s on Wednesday, dealing with, it wasn't technically a heat wave. The definition varies around the world, but, here in Canada, it's usually 3 days where the daytime high is 32 degrees or warmer. So we didn't technically have a heat wave. We did have some heat warnings that were in effect because of the hot and humid weather that was moving through. And nice that it wasn't long lasting, because obviously, when we have this kind of weather, we start to see increases in, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and it can be really challenging for some people to manage in this heat, especially for older people, children and babies, pregnant women. If you're working outside, I can't imagine what it was like working outside, all day on Tuesday and Wednesday, so it's very important that, we are staying safe during these periods of hot, humid weather. We get them every summer, but, heat is one of the leading weather-related causes of death here in Canada. So it's always very important that we are taking the heat seriously. A lot of us can tolerate it, or we can find an escape to somewhere cool, but a lot of us, not everyone has that luxury. So it's always very important that you're staying safe during this hot, humid weather. And thankfully, it's been nicer. We had cooler weather yesterday and today, and it's certainly not as humid out there.
Okay, so the criteria for heat warnings is what?
So the criteria for a heat warning depends on two factors. There's the temperature factor, which is 2 or more consecutive days of daytime maximum temperatures expected to reach 29 degrees or warmer, and at nighttime it's 16 degrees or warmer. Or you have 2 or more consecutive days where humidex values are expected to reach 36 or higher. And essentially, we talked about the humidex last week, but the higher the humidex, the increased risk that we do see, heat-related illnesses because our body is just not able to cool down when it's so humid. We're sweating to try to cool down, but it's not able to evaporate as fast as in a drier air mass, and that is why we see those heat-related illnesses start to increase when, it's obviously hot, but also very humid, and it's not too often that we get heat without the humidity here in Halifax. Wednesday was a bit of an exception where we had the humidity drop throughout the day, and in the afternoon, even though it was hot, it was actually pretty dry in the atmosphere. But on a day like Tuesday, humidex values were well into the high 30s and low 40s across the province, or for many areas. There was relief at the coast, but that is why we had those heat warnings, because we were meeting the criteria for that 2-day window. Does not define a heat wave, but obviously those alerts are issued, because of the weather, but more so to alert you of the risks that are associated with high heat and humidity.
Okay, what about thunderstorm alerts?
Yeah, we're starting to see more of those popping up around this time of year, and maybe sometimes a bit of confusion about what a severe thunderstorm watch is and a severe thunderstorm warning. So a severe thunderstorm watch is when conditions in the atmosphere are favorable for the development of severe thunderstorms. And it's very important because I did receive a comment earlier in the week that said, we get, they issue severe thunderstorm watches all the time and it never materializes. Well, thunderstorms by nature are often incredibly localized, and our counties are quite big. You have, for example, I'll say Hants County, where the weather in Windsor is a lot different than the weather in Elmsdale, for example, right? So when you're dealing with these thunderstorms, they are often, contained to a small geographical area, relatively speaking. So the watches are there because the conditions in the atmosphere are favorable. And, thunderstorm forecasting is, pretty accurate within, 3 days. You can get a pretty good sense of, a thunderstorm risk in a 3-day window. You can see signals for it longer term, but within 3 days, you really start to know the risk. And then certainly the day of, you're using your convective weather models to see where that convection is most likely to occur, aligning with the atmospheric conditions. But the reality is the ingredients can be there for a thunderstorm to develop and the potential for a severe thunderstorm, but it's always possible that it might not occur. So those watches are just a bit of a general, the conditions in the atmosphere are favorable, keep an eye on the sky, and then the thunderstorm warning means, it's imminent or occurring. You run into the same issue where the warning could be issued for, say, even Halifax Metro County West, but it could be impacting just a small cluster of communities. And I think that is where we need to see some improvements in our weather alerting. In the U.S., they have watch and warning boxes that cover more specific towns and communities. And I'm not sure if this is an accurate statement, so please don't quote me on it. I believe Environment Canada may be testing or looking at implementing something similar where those alerts are issued for specific communities rather than an entire county, just because of how localized they can be. Right. But essentially, the watch, the conditions are favorable. We might have thunderstorms. The warning, they have developed. They're imminent or occurring.
Okay. And before I let you go, just again, the weekend weather and Canada Day weather.
Yeah. So the pick of the weekend, Sunday, although Sunday's really not, the best day either. Tomorrow, though, Saturday, looks like we'll see some showers developing later in the morning, continuing in the afternoon, and we could see some showers and thunderstorms Saturday night. Sunday, there will be opportunity for some drier weather, but still a chance of a few showers and a quite cloudy, and temperatures cool, only 16 Saturday, and we warm up to, near 19 or 20 for Sunday. Nicer on Monday if you do have it off, and then Canada Day Tuesday. Right now, still a bit uncertain. I'm calling for a mix of sun and cloud, but a chance we could see some showers move in Tuesday evening and night. So there's always something that tries to interfere with the fireworks here in Halifax. If it's not rain, it's fog. So there's still time for that outlook to solidify. But right now, targeting perhaps later day Tuesday and Tuesday night for the potential for a few showers.
Okay, pal. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you got it. Allister Aalders, our weather specialist. Sports with Cecil when we come back. All right, time to talk sports with Cecil Wright, our sports guru. Cecil Wright, welcome to the show as always, bud. How are you?
What's happening, buddy?
Not much, man. Not much. Listen, I got a question for you. If you're the Boston Red Sox right now, are you folding your tent, or are you hanging in there? And I'm hearing that they might be looking for somebody to play first base and might be looking at a big trade. What can you tell us about the Red Sox right now?
Well, the fact that they got rid of their best player again, you had Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts, and now, Devers, who came up admiring both of those two, means that you're not really looking to win games this year. How do you get rid of your best hitter and claim that you're trying to win baseball games? Yeah. To me, it was an opportunity for them to dump that big $300 million contract, which they did because San Francisco said that they'd be willing to eat the whole thing. So they made the move. I don't like it, but I'll accept it as long as they don't fold the tent. Just show me that you're trying to win. Whether you win or not doesn't even matter. But show the fans. I mean, you're paying $150 to sit in the back row of the bleachers in Fenway Park tonight to watch them play against the Toronto Blue Jays, and Vladdy Guerrero might not even be paying.
Yeah.
I mean, the money is just outrageous. I'm so angry over this whole Devers thing, in case you didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, listen, as a Yankee fan, rebuilding is not an option. And I would think that for the Red Sox, I would think that would be the same philosophy from a fan perspective. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's why I'm saying just show me that you're trying to win baseball games.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna start crap it all over the young guys that they brought up, because I remember when Dustin Pedroia came up, he was terrible for like the first 3 months of his career. The guy could barely swing the bat. And look at how his career took a turn for the best as far as the Red Sox are concerned. So I'm just saying, trade for somebody who is an established player, who there's name recognition, that will give the fans a little bit of comfort knowing that they got rid of a guy that they thought could help them win, but they brought in somebody that might be able to replace some of his production.
Yeah, looking at the AL East, nobody's running away with this. The Yankees aren't playing great ball. The Blue Jays are, I think, the hottest team in the AL East right now. But I don't think anybody's going to run away with the AL East. What are your thoughts?
Nah, it's probably going to be within 2 to 5 games all the way into September, I think.
Yeah.
And the fact for Toronto, by the way, the fact that Max Scherzer came back the other night and pitched 5 innings or so, to me, is amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Got a non-decision out of it, and that's I think for a first game back, did as well as you could expect.
Well, that's my point with the Red Sox too. Is you can't give up on guys simply because A, you don't like them, B, you don't like the contract, C, you don't think they get along with anybody in the clubhouse. Can they help you win baseball games? That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Okay.
Pete Rose wasn't the most respected guy in the locker room, but he helped them win games.
And for sure. Reports say the NHL and the NHLPA are closing in on a 4-year extension of their collective bargaining agreement, and they're going to expand the season by 2 games to 84 games. Any thoughts or any comments on this?
Not really. I mean, I think the season is long enough as it is.
Yeah, me too.
Especially with the physicality of these hockey games and, the injury status of, a lot of the superstars in the game. I don't see how, extending the season by a couple games makes any big difference.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get your take on Barry Bonds here because he's getting a statue outside of the Giants' home stadium. He spent 15 of his 22 big league seasons with the Giants. Bonds set the single-season MLB record with home runs, and obviously 756 career home runs, surpassed Hank Aaron in 2007. But around him has always been a shroud of steroids. Has anything ever been definitively proven against Barry Bonds when it comes to steroids?
I think it has. Memory serves me correct. I've tried to eliminate Barry Bonds from any thought that I've ever had. But I'll tell you, when he played for Pittsburgh, I thought he was a heck of a player, and I loved him. And it was only after he went to San Francisco and, did what we suspect that he did. Yeah. The whole Balco thing, remember all that?
I do. Yeah.
There's no question in my mind that he was juicing. And as far as putting a statue of Barry Bonds in San Francisco, you put a statue of Willie Mays or Willie McCovey and Juan Marichal and those guys here before you put a statue of a tainted Barry Bonds.
Yeah, because again, like Pete Rose, you mentioned Pete Rose and his, of course, didn't make the Hall of Fame and all that goes with it. So, Barry Bonds, is he in the same category, would you say? Or I would put Barry Bonds in a much worse category than Pete Rose.
I put Barry Bonds in the same category as Sammy Sosa, as Mark McGwire, and a couple of those other guys who, some of them have admitted it. There's a guy, a former Red Sox player by the name of Mo Vaughn. Just recently came out and admitted that he helped himself a little bit more than some other players. So I give him credit for at least confessing. But, some people just like Barry Bonds, man, first of all, he's kind of temperamental on the best of days and was difficult for reporters to deal with. So, you can just imagine the poor reporter that has the courage and temerity to say, "So, Barry, were you juicing?" He's probably going to get the wind thrown right at him.
For sure. Just quickly, do you think that steroids are still in the game?
I think that players forever will do something, whatever they can, to get an advantage. And if that means that some are willing to take a shot, they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Agreed. Okay, what's going on locally before I let you go?
Well, weather permitting, we've got a doubleheader tomorrow on Eastlink. The Dartmouth Dry and the Sydney Sooners, two of the top teams in the league perennially, and hopefully we'll have the weather cooperating and some great baseball on TV.
Okay, bud, always great. Appreciate it. We'll do it again next week, pal.
Take care.
Okay, you got it. Cecil Wright, our sports guru. I'd like to thank Dan Alstrand and Blake Prettle today, who were on the other side of the glass. Vanessa was off today. As mentioned, her daughter graduated today. And with high honors, as a matter of fact. Congratulations to Vanessa and her daughter. Well done. We are back on Monday, 10 o'clock. See you then.